We're going to touch different topics. Now we're recording. Okay, so the global conversation on synthetic biology. And my name is Ana Sinfuentes. I'm the visual designer for iGEM headquarters. I'm also the delegate program coordinator, which is the specific program within iGEM that takes students to United Nations meetings to talk about synthetic biology. So to introduce myself a little bit more, I have been working for iGEM headquarters for the past 7 years. And before that, I was part of 2 teams. Back in Mexico, I was part of the Tec Monterrey team in 2011 and in 2012. And I was doing all the wiki and the visuals. So my background is not science. That's the spoiler alert that I'm not a scientist. But I have been involved in the world of synthetic biology for several years. And my role is basically to communicate science and facilitate communications, whether if it's visual or through words. So we're gonna have these topics during the presentation. So a little bit of the, excuse me, the iGEM competition. Then we're gonna go over international meetings, the delegate program, and then the last 2 are an interactive activity, which is a series of questions. And then I'm gonna open the floor to have an open discussion so people can share their ideas and start working together, okay? So first of the iGEM competition, do we have anyone in the chat or that has not been part of iGEM or is new to iGEM? If you are, you can comment on the chat and I will read the comments. So just as a simple blanket definition, iGEM stands for International Genetically Engineered Machine. And it's an independent non-profit organization dedicated to the advancement of synthetic biology, education, competition, and innovation. No? Basically, this is a map of where iGEM teams have been for the last year. Last year's, we don't have 2020 yet because we're finishing that. The year's still happening. So you can see that iGEM has spread across most continents and a lot of people have participated in the past. So iGEM is not only to do science or engineering. Teams have to have a very comprehensive approach. They need to advocate for their work. They need to present it and explain it in a way that it's easy for everyone to understand. So not only experts in that field can see what they have been doing. They also have to explore the ethics and responsibility of what they're doing. Like, should we be doing this project? You can do the parallel to Jurassic Park. What the scientist is asking, like, should you have done this? That's probably a really good question to ask when you're starting to work in your iGEM project. You also will reach out into different areas and start talking about it. So you'll engage in public outreach and addresses safety implications. And here at the bottom, we have examine public policy and regulation and law. So you have to make sure that wherever in the world you're working, the project that you're going to do is safe and it's also properly regulated. And we're gonna see how complicated that second part is as we move forward. So in iGEM, you're basically, regardless of how much work you do inside the lab, how you're going to be judged relies a lot on how you're good at communicating what you did. Because it doesn't matter if you have amazing results in the lab and a beautiful project, if you're not able to communicate it so other people can understand what you did. And you see the aspects where you're being judged and then the awards are being given is on the wiki, poster, and presentation, which are basically communicating. Teams also work outside the lab, and this is where we start getting a little bit more related to public policy and safety and outreach, because you have to make sure that the project that you're doing will have a positive impact. And because positive can be very subjective, you have to talk to other people and see, okay, is what I'm doing really helping them? Are there other solutions? Am I taking into consideration what the other person is saying? And that is done through human practices. Here are just a couple of examples of what teams have done. So working within the biosafety laws and checking that the regulations are okay, so what you can do. And then you have people who are working directly with the people who would be using the product, so like working with dairy farmers. Safety is a little bit more towards the actual policy itself, rather than human practices of questioning and talking with people. This is like, okay, are what we're doing in the lab safe? Is it going to harm anyone? Should we consider the potential misuse of what's happening with the dual use concern? And this is basically a quick introduction to iGEM. I see that someone is also new to iGEM in the chat, so welcome to the community. And now that we have a quick introduction of what is iGEM, or how iGEM relates to these topics, we're gonna go into international meetings. Because maybe an interesting question right now is like, well, why is synthetic biology being discussed here in the first place? So what happens at these meetings? In a general sense, policymakers, delegates, government officials, and other stakeholders get together to create global guidelines and regulations with the input of nonprofits, academics, and scientists. That is the ideal scenario, that when a new technology emerges, or when there is a new crisis, like the climate crisis that we have right now, or the crisis on biodiversity, policymakers and representatives from each government will get together, sign a treaty, and establish what are the guidelines to work. Like, okay, maybe we should cut down emissions. Maybe we should do a more active reforestation campaign. And it will vary what part of the world needs to do that, because it varies of the ecosystem that they have to address. So this is a photo from one of the United Nations meetings. Here you can see how the people from different parts of the world have their little assigned areas where they would sit together. I don't know if you can see it very well, but there's some like rectangular little screens. Those at the top of the table say where the people are from, so the country, and people from the country sit on the front part, and then if I remember correctly, in some versions it's alphabetical, so as you go further down, further away from the podium, you would have nonprofit organizations and other external organizations that are attending the event. So here, the chair on the front of the auditorium will be managing the conversation. No? They will be controlling the agenda, assigning people who request to have the floor, and they will press the button and say their opinion on the matter. And that's how it continues. And once a topic is closed, then they will move on to the next one. So this is a breakdown of the schedule of what you can expect in those meetings. In the ones that we have attended through the delegate program, this is usually what happens. You will have a welcome ceremony where everybody gets together. The chair has some special guests saying some welcome announcement like, hello everyone, thank you for attending this meeting. We're gonna review these topics. It's very formal the way everyone is being addressed in the meeting. There's like specific protocols to the things you have to say. Like, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing my country to be part of this meeting. We're very happy to be here. We want to thank the hosting country and the hosting authorities, and just a very formal process of saying like, thank you for having me here. And that's the welcome ceremony. Then you have the plenary sessions where the big topics are being discussed. In the Convention on Biological Diversity, there were 2 plenary sessions. So in one, they will discuss one of the protocols, and in the other one, they will discuss other matters. So matters can be financial, of how the treaty in the meeting is going to support countries to achieve the goals set during those conferences. So for example, if it's achieving some biodiversity goals or reducing emissions, how is a country going to do that? Like, are they going to be provided with extra funds so they can hire experts to come up with a better regional plan? Then you have other topics like new emerging technologies and how they're going to be regulated in general. So that's what is being addressed during the plenary sessions. Then you would have side events. That's where like external groups, kind of like nonprofits. So for example, iGEM would host an event and welcome delegates attending the conference so they can talk about a specific topic. So for example, there would be side events on synthetic biology, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky because people who might not be in favor of genetically modified organisms, that's like a big word in these meetings, will probably push an agenda towards the delegates that is not very well informed and can often be misleading, and rather than achieve understanding, they might spread misinformation. So that can be very damaging. We will touch later on the points that unfortunately, there are not a lot of scientists being involved with policy. Even in school, they don't really tell you like, oh, as a scientist, you should be involved with policy. So we can discuss that a little bit later. No? Then you will also have regional meetings. So groups that live close to countries that are close to each other or have some similarities. For example, the mega diverse countries will have their own special meeting and discuss topics because they have to have different considerations than other countries. Yeah, so during the plenary sessions, they will also review the documents. They would, for example, for the Cartagena Treaty, they would go into each section, review it, see if they need to be made annotations or if it needs to be modified. And here is like where it's being crafted, because there will be if during the plenary session they're not able to achieve compromise and say like, okay, this is how the text should be redacted, they will have a special meeting where countries who are particularly interested in that will get together and try to iron out what the treaty should say. Like, what is the actual definition of synthetic biology is very complex. So should it be adapted to what the Cartagena Protocol already establishes, or should it have its own definition and its own subsequent treaty? And how much should we decide? How much time should we adjust to this? And it escalates very quickly because it's a lot of people having to achieve compromise. So basically a good negotiation, this is what I heard during one of the meetings, is when everybody's equally unhappy. That's a good balance that you want in these documents. So in case those meetings where they haven't been able to achieve that compromise keep going for several days, they would have these Friends of the Chair events, which is like people who are very opposed to each other on the same topic would get together with the chair of that meeting to like, okay, how are we going to fix this? That's like the general schedule. Okay, so why is synthetic biology being part of this? Well, because of the potential that it has and because it's a new technology, it has become a really strong agenda topic. So I don't know if you guys remember like the last couple of years, or I remember that there was this huge protest during the conferences where people were opposing GMOs. And I'm sure that you as people in science and in iGEM have encountered people who are opposed to anything that's not organic. And it's not saying that organic is bad, it's just that it might not be the best option if we want to have a sustainable diet for everyone on the planet. And we can use science and synthetic biology as a way to provide more food and more nutritional products. So there is not necessarily a bad use of GMOs. It depends on how they're being used, no? They're not inherently bad by themselves. But also we have seen how the misuse of synthetic biology could be harmful, especially if you go into more sci-fi dystopic areas where people can have their DNA modified, or having viruses created in the lab and other things like that. Then it's like, oh, is this a good technology or is it not? So my question right now, we can put it on the chat, we can start discussing a little bit. My first question is technology bad? I'm gonna take advantage to have a little bit of coffee. So this is interesting to touch, because when you're creating treaties, you want to be able to allow people to do research, but you also don't want them to misuse that technology and harm other people. So this is a very delicate balance that needs to be achieved in these documents. Yeah, my idea is that technology is not inherently bad. And this is something that we use to explain synthetic biology. Because when you go to these meetings, some people will have a very negative idea of like, no, we should not be messing with DNA. We should not touch anything like that. And you can make the parallel that fire can also, is basically one of our first technologies, quote unquote. No? And fire is not bad. It can burn houses, it can hurt you if you touch it, but it also keeps us warm, and we can use it to create fuel and other things. So it's not that technology that's inherently bad, it's the use that it's being given. Okay, thank you. This is a good conversation. Most technology isn't bad. Yeah. A lot of people promoting technology. Oh, that's a hot take. Thank you. Okay, so in policy, you would have to create proper regulation, because very big policy can threaten vulnerable populations. So for example, if the policy says like anyone can access the genetic resources of this country, and then some scientists from another country are like, okay, we're gonna grab the genetic resources from here. No, that's perfect. But what if that specific genetic sequence that's very important is used by a native population as part of their rituals or as part of their in food intake, and somebody else wants to deplete that resource? Then are they doing it for science because they want to make something better by studying that? Or is it bad because you're harming a native population that might not have control over that area because they have been marginalized within the regulations of their country. So that big policy can be very, very harmful. Then on the other side, you have overregulation that can put a complete halt on research, because the other side that you could take is like, okay, so these generic resources belong to the people from that country. No one else can touch them. We're not gonna even study them. They're sacred. And they're like, well, what if we could study them and then create medicine through them or develop new technologies? Then you're halting research completely. So policy and science have to achieve this balance of allowing researchers to access this information and make their experiments, but protect the people who are already using that. So there's no exploitation. And just to go over the meetings that we have attended the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. This happened in my beautiful home country, Mexico, in 2016. This was the first meeting we attended as part of the delegate program. And during this one, we discussed the Nagoya Protocol and the Cartagena Protocol. Excuse me, Cartagena Protocol refers to biodiversity and the Nagoya Protocol refers to genetic resources. That's like the simplest summary I can give you. If you want to learn more about those individual protocols and how they impact you as a scientist, there are a lot of resources online and it's very extended, the information you can find. And the second meeting we attended was the Biological Weapons Convention, in which Ronit, who is going to give the next session, she was one of the delegates there. Hi, Ronit. And this one is being discussed of the potential misuse of biological weapons. Like in this meeting, it's a little bit less controversial than in CBD, where you're saying like, is synthetic biology bad? Are GMOs bad? In this one, we're like, no, synthetic biology is not bad, but we just need to regulate so this is not being misused. And then the next meeting we attended was also CBD. This was in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. It was also part of it continues a conversation from 2 years ago. So they meet every 2 years to continue this. The next one in 2020, this year, would have been in Beijing. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it has been canceled and postponed, which is good because we don't want people traveling unnecessarily nowadays. And then that one we attended last year was a little bit different, which is the Sustainable Development Goals Festival. Here, people from all over the world reunited in Germany to discuss how their local initiatives are pushing to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Is everyone familiar with the SDGs in the chat? If you have questions about them, you can also put them. But SDGs basically are the goals that we want to achieve to reduce climate change and inequality at a global scale. And if you overlap them with the iGEM tracks or the goals of iGEM, you can see that we're trying to achieve the same things. Okay, now we're going to the delegate program. So the delegate programs bring students to key international meetings in order to be part of the global conversation in synthetic biology. So from what I've said, if you imagine that these regulations would impact how research is done, do you expect a lot of scientists to be involved in the conversation? What is the percentage of scientists that you would expect in a room when I tell you they're discussing synthetic biology? If people want to guess in the chat. We will expect at least 50%, so it will be an equal conversation. So people who know a lot about the topic will be able to give their opinion, but it's usually 1 or 2 scientists in the room, or sometimes no scientist, which is very sad. Yes, even in CBD, we were surprised. One of our delegates had to explain, reunited with people from his country to explain what was synthetic biology, because they were not briefed properly. It's a very new technology. And how many scientists or how many of your friends who are studying biotech wake up and say one day like, oh yeah, I want to be part of policy. I want to be a science policymaker. Like, have you ever heard your friends say that? People are usually more interested in pursuing another degree in academia or going into industry. Policy is not really an area that people have in mind when they want to go forward with their career. So hopefully that changes in the future and more scientists become the representatives of their country in these meetings. That it's essential that you know what is happening and how to explain it. So in a brief summary, we have attended 4 meetings with a total of 14 delegates and with 9 regions being represented from the delegates. Okay, and the goals is basically to bridge the gap between scientists and legislators. So a thing that I haven't touched in this conversation yet is that ultimately policymakers are also people, scientists are also people, and the goal that everyone has in these meetings is to create the best policy possible to protect vulnerable populations and biodiversity, while also allowing scientists to do their research so they can help everyone. We have seen this year how crucial the role of scientists is in our society, that we need them, and we need you as scientists to help spread the correct information to keep us safe. So these people are experts in policy. They know a lot about international policy. They know how to address people from different countries. They have a lot of international training and a lot of diplomacy to give their opinion in a very polite way and to try to get their point across. However, they're not scientists. They don't know all the expertise. So the role that the delegates, what we asked them, was to explain synthetic biology in a simple way. And our role was not to go there and like grab a pen and start writing policy. No, our goal was to be there to listen what is being said in the conversation and to give our opinions to people who were asking. We can approach and say like, okay, can I help? Hi, I am an iGEM delegate. Do you have any questions? Is there anything I can help you with? Oh, hang on 1 second. Is the audio still working fine?
From my part, it's working perfectly.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Just gotta double check. If it's getting a bit noisy, let me know and I'll put on the headphones. Now I lost it. Sorry. Okay, let's go quickly back to what we were saying. So yeah, sorry about that. So we need to talk to policymakers and learn from interactions from them. Basically answer questions on synthetic biology and be able to provide information. The thing is, these meetings are full of people and you only probably have like 5 minutes or less than 5 minutes to talk to someone. And you have to really take advantage of that time and of that person's time and, say like, and try to explain things and be polite and talk about synthetic biology super quickly. So we're gonna have an activity where we're gonna simulate some of those interactions a little bit later. Let's get to it. So yeah, the people that we look for the delegate program are enthusiastic to learn, polite, respectful, adaptable. So basically, iGEMers, because you have gone through all of this and being able to, like through your iGEM experience, you have been able to do all of these things. When a curveball is thrown, you have to like, oh my gosh, we need to reschedule everything and change everything very last minute and present all of our information and keep calm. So it's the same thing that happened at one of these conferences. So the schedule basically for a delegate program event, when right now we don't have anything planned because of the pandemic, so we are taking a break. Hopefully when traveling is safe, we can retake this program and continue with one event a year. So basically an event is identified by iGEM, we apply to attend, then we promote. During the application, we have to send a very detailed explanation of why is iGEM important in this event, what can we bring to the conversation, do we have expertise in this area. Luckily for iGEM, we have lots of years of experience, so it's easy for us to apply and be accepted as a non-profit organization. Then we promote this event to our iGEM community. We search for applicants. They're evaluated anonymously by previous delegates. Then the high scoring applicants are interviewed. The interviews are very fast, just because they need to leave a good impression in those 5 minutes, because at the same time they're gonna have with delegates at the conference. So it's important to have like a good, quick first impression. Then the delegates are selected We have some preparatory calls with expert meetings, like as the events have continued throughout the years, we have included more preparation for the students, having conversations with experts and small webinars for them. Then the iGEM delegation attends the event. After the event, they submit a formal report, and then we have a final wrap-up call to see how we can improve for next time. So you can see that policy impacts how research can be conducted, and how they can access information on a global scale. So it's important to know what policy is impacting you when you do your research and how this changes from country to country. And this is being discussed in areas where not a lot of scientists are being involved in the conversation. So just some testimonials. I'm not gonna read all of them. Some of our attendees from last year, they mentioned that human practices is basically a good entry to policy. And then if you get more into safety, those are the areas that if you're particularly interested in that side of the project, maybe you would like to pursue this interest of yours towards more science policy. Okay. And what we have achieved as part of the delegate program is we've been able to register to multiple conferences. We were invited to the Geneva Dialogues, which Ronnie attended in behalf of iGEM to continue the conversation. And we were also invited to a regional workshop in Latin America in science and technology to talk about the delegate program, which I attended in Mexico City. So in summary, by being in charge of the delegate program and being part of this experience, I feel that through dialogue and exchange, we enrich our experience and understanding, and we become better scientists and better people. Even though I'm not a scientist, I have to be in favor of science and defend science. So it's interesting to see how someone who doesn't have full expertise can also try to understand, because I can sympathize very easily with the policymakers who are not experts in this area, and sometimes information can be presented as daunting. Like if you give an explanation of what synthetic biology is and you go too technical, you're probably going to alienate your audience. So the thing that you have to do is present it in an easy way to understand and just connect with the other person and say, like, how can I help you? And never think that you know more than them. Just go from a place of wanting to do better and more humility and humbleness. That would be my approach to whenever you're discussing with someone, regardless of their background, how to explain things. Okay, so now that I've given my presentation or the things we wanted to talk about, we can go towards the interactive activity. So I'm gonna ask the help from the committees to maybe open microphones when people request them. Or if people want to use a chat, I can also read from the chat, whichever one is better. Okay. So this is the simulation. Let's pretend we're attending CBD, so the Convention on Biological Diversity. How would you answer the questions to someone without a scientific background? So a policymaker or another stakeholder that is not necessarily a scientist. And remember, try to keep your answers short and simple. Let's pretend you have less than a minute to answer the questions. Okay, so let's go. The first question is, how would you explain iGEM? So you arrive to the convention. Hi, how are you? Good. Pleasantries are exchanged. And then you have like, so where are you from? From iGEM. Okay, what is iGEM? Do we have anyone who wants to explain iGEM super briefly? I think.
George,
yes, go ahead.
I will allow you to talk, or you can.
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I will explain iGEM as biology students, students solving local problems using biotechnology.
Okay, thank you, Jorge. Yeah, that's a very concise answer. Do we have someone else who also wants to give their answer? Okay, Alonso says in the chat, it's like a school where you learn how to make responsible science and solve local problems. Okay? Do we have anyone else who wants to contribute to this one, or do we want to get to the really meaty one of synthetic biology? Because I think that one is, iGEM, if you say like, well, it's a competition for students interested in synthetic biology, then the other person will probably ask like, okay, what is synthetic biology? Should we jump directly to that one?
Anna, I would like to know, how would you explain iGEM, or have you explained iGEM?
Yeah, so when I had to explain it, the easiest way that I've said is iGEM is an international competition for students interested in the field of synthetic biology. And what they want to do is, through this technology, provide solutions. And I usually use the example of bioremediation because it's a topic that it's already in people's minds, or to provide extra nutrients in food. Because you also have to think of things that the other person can connect easily. And we tend to be a very visual species. So when you make allegories of something visual or something that's in their mind, it's easier for the other person to understand. So yeah, maybe in iGEM you can say student competition in synthetic biology. That would also open the other person to ask more about synthetic biology, and then you can go towards that topic. Okay, you also have Javier. I explained iGEM as a non-profit organization to develop new biotechnology to society benefits. Okay, thank you, Javier. So now, do we want to go towards what is synthetic biology and how to explain it? Oh, we have a couple of raised hands.
Hello. Can you guys hear me? Oh
Yes.
yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'd say that synthetic biology is the science where, rather than just studying biology, you think about engineering it. And a lot of that uses genetic engineering, which involves mixing and matching DNA of different organisms to provide some utility.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you, Wes. Hope I got your name right.
yeah, you did. Thanks.
Yeah, I apologize if I mispronounce anything. Okay, but thank you. Okay, I think Jorge also raised his hand. Okay, in the meantime, I can read from the chat. It's like programming a computer, but instead of ones and zeros, you use 4 letters so you can produce useful stuff like drugs. Okay, thank you, Alonso.
I would define synthetic biology as applying as building oh, I completely forgot the words that I was going to use. Uh, uh, give me a second. Yes, basically as using the principles of engineering to build a genetic circuit to give a tangible result. Basically, biological constructions that do not exist in nature.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jorge. We have Devanjan. Hope I got that one right. Engineering and redesigning nature to solve problems for public good. And we have Andre Herman saying, I explain synthetic biology as a DVTL, cycle applying biology, gaining more knowledge always. Okay. I think someone else raised their hand in the chat. I think it was Niraj. Okay, solving current world problems using nature's gifts. From
Hello.
Vignesh.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Uh,
Well, I think it broke a little bit.
You're muted right now, so yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, now we
Am
can.
I audible? Oh, I want to just mention that in my opinion, there are two major aspects that define the field of synthetic biology. And the first one is the design of novel biological components and systems. And the second one is the redesign of existing biological systems.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Niraj. Do we have any other contributions? Okay, we have Javier saying synthetic biology is reimagine and remake biology for solve problems and need for modern society and approach better resources for new technologies. Okay, thank you so much, Javier. Do we have anyone else who wants to contribute how to explain synthetic biology? Okay, I can contribute mine. What I usually tell people, thank you, Naina. If you have any more amazing answers, you can raise your hand, or you can also say them a little bit later because I have more questions in the next slide. We can go back to some of these if you would like to explain them. What I would say is that synthetic biology is basically engineering biology. So I make the analogy with computers. So for example, computers, you can enter code and give the computer instructions to do something. In biology, in synthetic biology, what you would do is give the bacteria or the organism instructions through DNA code so they produce something different. So for example, they create a specific protein that can be used to add to food so it's more nutritious and it has better nutritional value for people who are in vulnerable populations. Or they can modify the behavior of the bacteria so instead it would start absorbing pollutants in water. So again, always try to make an analogy with something that people can understand easily. If whatever you can find as common ground, that is going to be the easiest way to bridge that difference and say like, okay, of course, I know about bioremediation. Of course, I know about water pollutants. We all want to remove water pollutants from our bodies of water. So that's your entry. That's find that common ground to what you're saying. This will be very useful, not only in explaining science, but in everything in life. So this is my pro tip for life. Okay, so now we're going to go into explain your favorite iGEM project in one sentence. It can be yours, it can be some other teams. How would you explain it in a single sentence? Okay, Jorge raised his hand.
Fighting forest fires using bubble nests.
Okay, I think that's the project from UANL from this year, no, Jorge?
Yep, that's our project.
Yay. Okay, do we have anyone else who wants to contribute?
Can I go?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I think mine would be, I think this project from Cambridge University team, which was your poop comes out as funny colors and the color tells you how healthy you are, which was 2014 at iGEM, I think, Cambridge, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's Chroma, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, we have tackling AMR using synthetic antimicrobial peptides. That's an iGEM 2018 project. Thank you, Naina. Okay, one project that I really like is using paratransgenics to fight dengue and other mosquito-related diseases. That's okay. And then we have Shesta tackled methane GHG by sensing their leakage. Okay. Then we have Alonso saying chronic kidney disease using bacteria to fight a chronic disease. Okay. Perfect. Does anyone else want to contribute their favorite iGEM project? Okay, my recommendation would be when you're explaining your iGEM project, and this is not only for when you attend these types of meetings or even when you're presenting to other people who don't have scientific background, maybe potential stakeholders or even people who are contributing to your project. We have Serenity, I'm so sorry. Citric off, fight citric fruit diseases. Okay, thank you so much. My recommendation would be to avoid any technical terms. So try to explain it as if you were explaining it to your grandma, how would you say to that person, okay, this is what we're doing. So we're doing an antigen detection kit. So we're basically grabbing blood samples and testing if you're allergic to something. Like, try to bring it down the easiest way possible, and just pretend you're trying to explain it to your grandma. You can also do this when you're preparing for your presentation, or for other ways that you need to do science communication. Is like, test how someone who is older than you understands it, and how someone that is younger than you understands it. So like, ask both your grandmother and maybe your little cousin if they understand the same sentence of what you're trying to do in the lab. So you will see that a lot of the delegate program and a lot of science policy is being able to communicate science. And it's not because the other person is not as smart as you are, it's just that they have a different area of expertise and we need to find common ground. So my suggestion is try to avoid technical terms as much as possible. Okay, with that being said, we can go to the next question. Okay, we have transgenics modifying gut bacteria genes. Okay, perfect. Yeah, try to go into that area. Like, I know technical terms are very specific for a reason because you're narrowing down what you mean, but try to use more general terms where you're explaining it. That's also a thing that you can do in your wiki or in your presentations. It's like, first introduce a concept, very generic. So anyone, regardless of their background, can understand it pretty easy, no? And then when you actually go into describing it, so you have more room to extend to what you're saying, then you can start bringing technical terms, because then you're also telling the person like, oh, this is what I mean by this. This is the correct term to use. The other person like, amazing, now I know something new. Okay? So the next question is, what would you say to someone who is against GMOs? So this is very common in the conference of biological diversity, that people are like, GMOs are bad, and you will see organizations who are very opposed to transgenics, who can also be not very respectful and can have very heated arguments because they are completely against GMOs. It's very difficult to convince them, no? Oh, it's a really good one. What are GMOs according to you? That you can always flip the question to see what the other person thinks of GMOs. And they say like, well, I think they're the devil. I think they're bad. And then you can continue asking someone. This is also another pro tip in communications. Like, when someone is very opposed to something, you can ask them why, and what is that problem according to you. And then they will try to explain it. They say like, well, it's bad. It's just the devil. And then you're like, okay, why is it bad? Then they will give you the reasons and you will know where they're coming from. You're like, oh no, you don't actually say no. You can try to say like, oh, GMOs are helpful in these types of situations, no? Okay, enzymes to bioremediation. Yes, that's also good to bring it to bioremediation of like cleaning the planet. Okay, Alonso is saying, first I would ask why they're against it in order to give a more accurate answer, but I would try to tell them that the work that we do in the lab takes into account all the safety measures in order to help our society. Yes, that's good, because you also want to reassure someone. Maybe they're thinking that the people who do GMOs are crazy scientists in their lab and they just want to harm people, and they will see you as an iGEMer, as a person who's trying to do positive change, and you can flip that image that they have. Say like, no, actually, it's young people trying to help their country. Okay. Okay, Jorge put a question in the Q&A. So, do you know that insulin is produced by GMO bacteria? Okay, we can answer that. Perfect. Okay, would anyone else like to contribute? What would they say to someone who's against GMOs? Okay, I think we're good with this one. So let me check the time. Okay, we've gone over the 45 minutes. So in case another session is starting, let me know and we can just go to questions right now and any final comments. And if not, we can go to the discussion if the next session starts at 11. Can I double check that with the organizers?
We'll have a next session in 10 minutes, but if you want to have a general thought to end your presentation or make more space for interaction, it's up to you.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I just wanted to check that I wasn't like stepping on somebody else's time. So yeah, we can open the floor to discussion. So basically, if anybody has comments, questions, or anything else, this is the time to have them or start just having the conversations. I brought some questions as well. You can consider maybe to have the conversation right now or even later during the day, like who should be creating policy, how involved should iGEMers be in policy, should policy be international or regional, and any other questions. So if people want to start that discussion.
There are many different frameworks on how each country already have developed an idea, and sometimes it's difficult to frame shift, like a country that is it's too restrictive to being more open, or a country that is too open and maybe should be more careful some things. So if you have any comments on that, I think it's interesting.
Yes, okay, we have Javier saying that policy should be international ISO protocols for quality and safety products and services. Okay, yeah, I also think there should be some general international guidelines, but I also think that within each country, there should be specific regulations because they might have different genetic resources that they want to protect, or they have those genetic resources being accessed by native populations, and they should have a say in how that policy impacts that particular one.
There is a question in the Q&A from Liz Khan. If does one have to be an iGEMer or after iGEMer to be part of the delegation to UN? He says, I've only partly supervised an iGEM team, but haven't directly taken part. So
for the delegate program, we prefer people who have been part of iGEM, but if you're very inclined to do so, once we have the open call for people to apply, we can review your application if you're very motivated and if you have excellent communication skills. That's basically what we're looking for, people who are involved in the iGEM community. So yeah, if you were part of mentoring a team, you were an iGEMer. So yes, we welcome you to apply, and then we'll do the whole process.
I will stop the recording now.
Okay.
Thanks for your presentation. It was really nice.